way. But I stumble and I falter every day. But I love my baby now. But I love my baby, I'm still learning how. Hey, 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 I'm okay. Stay with me. We'll beat these.
Hello. Welcome to another edition of Pathways to Parenting Success. I'm your host, Dr. Jan Hittelman, licensed psychologist, director of Boulder Psychological Services, and my pleasure to welcome you to this broadcast and this very important topic, medical marijuana facts and myths. We have some folks in our audience today, which we're really excited about, and for those of you watching at home, you can participate in this conversation as well. If you would like to do so, just visit our website, boulderpsychologicalservices.com, go to our calendar, click on this event, and you'll see there's a form where you can submit email questions live. We will get them here, and we will ask our guest those questions. So if you're watching live, please feel free to do that. Our website, again, is boulderpsychologicalservices.com. I want to start out by thanking our sponsors, the Boulder Valley School District, Channel 22, for making this possible. And I also want to acknowledge our other sponsors, the Daily Camera, Centennial Peaks Hospital, the Boulder County Healthy Youth Alliance, the Parent Engagement Network, Boulder Counseling Cooperative, the Hope Coalition, and the Temple Grandin School. We really appreciate your support to make these free events possible. I have as a guest today Dr. Leland Johnston. Dr. Johnston is a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist and also a psychoanalyst. He's been in private practice since 1983. And he currently teaches at the psychiatric residency of the University of Colorado Medical School. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Johnston to our broadcast today. Welcome, Lee.
Hey, thank you, Jan.
We're going to be covering a lot of ground in a short period of time, and I'm really hoping that it's useful with all that's happened specifically in our state of Colorado, medical marijuana, legalization of marijuana, et cetera. But this talk really is focused on medical marijuana, so we're going to try to keep it to that topic specifically. And I think I'd like to start by asking Dr. Johnston about what we know so far and what we don't know in terms of current medical research regarding the use of medical marijuana to treat a variety of different conditions.
Yeah, so to begin any kind of discussion about the research with medical marijuana, you have to understand the Controlled Substance Act of 1970. And in that act, we currently have been scheduling 5 type Schedule I drugs that are controlled substances. Marijuana has been a Controlled 1 substance. That means that it has so far not achieved any distinction with double-blind data as having indications for medical purposes, and at the same time is a highly addictive substance. So if you're going to move out of Controlled Substance Schedule I, you have to prove and document medical legitimacy, indications for medical treatment. Currently...
And that classification is really for drugs that have no known medical benefit. Isn't that part of the criteria for that?
That's part of the criteria for Schedule I. It's in there with all the other hallucinogens and other substances. That Controlled Substances Act was set up to be managed and monitored, and drugs go in and out of the various control schedules by virtue of both the DEA and the FDA. The DEA is the Drug Enforcement Agency, and the FDA is the Federal Drug Administration. Now, that's important to know because when marijuana got medicalized, it had very little to do with the fact that there's been really research driving the use of medical marijuana. It's all been really driven by the anecdotal reports of people getting various responses and, of course, whatever there was about the medical marijuana marketplace. What I think is really important when you discuss the research, one of the most important research findings wasn't really about medical marijuana. It was about the fact that there's a cannabinoid receptor system. This got really discovered in the 1990s, even though NIH had made a substance called Marinol for treating nausea. It really wasn't until the 1990s that it was understood that there's endocannabinoids that are natural to the body, and there's a cannabinoid receptor system. Now, that's basic science research, and there's a great deal going on with that. One of the things that's thought, and the data seems to point to the fact that the cannabinoid receptor system is responsible for modulating the downregulation, upregulation of gating of nerve transmission across other receptor systems. So it's been understood for quite a while that marijuana is a very complex substance with 60 cannabinoids, sometimes 70, depending how you count them, and 400 other chemicals. And so far, only 2 cannabinoids have been researched to any degree. That's THC, which is the psychoactive cannabinoid, and then CBD, which is cannabidiol. THC is known to hit CB1 receptors, and cannabidiol is known to hit CB2 receptors. And both interact with each other in ways that are quite complex. Currently, there's 3 meds that have achieved in various countries a level of data that there's 3 products, that medications. One is Sativex, and it's a vapor that's inhaled. It's used a lot with MS and other pain conditions. Epidiolex is the product that's being tested for seizure disorder. And then Marinol, the product that's been used for nausea control, particularly with chemotherapy. Now, we can talk about all of these different conditions and so forth, but I can get too far into this.
Here's my question. This is what I always think about when I think about this topic. Should we be more open to moving the marijuana out of that class 1 so that we can start doing more research? Because it's my understanding, Dr. Johnston, correct me if I'm wrong, that part of the challenge, the overwhelming challenge, is we just haven't done enough research to know what the effects are. And especially with sort of recreational use of marijuana, the dosage level, I mean, we need really controlled empirical studies to figure this out. And my understanding is that part of the challenge is that because it's a class 1 substance, it's very difficult for researchers to utilize that substance and to do the research necessary to figure out what possible benefits there may be to medical marijuana.
Well, that's true, and it's been especially true prior to the medicalization of marijuana. Now, currently, there's a lot of research interest, and you can get marijuana in lots of ways at the potency levels and get approval for research. Like the current research that's being undertaken, it's really the first large-scale double-blind data that's being developed for seizure disorders. It's using a product called Epidiolex, which is out of GW Pharmaceuticals in Great Britain. It's a very pure form of cannabidiol, and it's been very highly supported by the NIH. Gotten very prominent FDA approval. There's 6 research sites where this very high sort of level double-blind placebo, randomized trials, prospectively done over a period of time, is being conducted. As I said, probably 6 research centers will be reporting their data this coming year, later in this year. Mm-hmm. It's very exciting. All the research currently is being done with a developmental population of congenital seizure disorders. And but it's the experience of people in the general population of a lot of people getting various kinds of results from things that are CBD predominantly. In this country, we don't really have a pure form of CBD. A lot is being sold as a pure form, like Charlotte's Web. There's still a certain percentage that is very low. It gets advertised as 1% to 2% or less of THC is in the CBD. But what really needs to happen is the research they're doing currently with really pure form CBD and make these distinctions about dosing and so forth with each of the seizure disorders.
And have you found since the legalization of medical marijuana then that there's a little bit more of an openness around that research? It seems
Oh,
to be
yeah.
turning a corner.
Oh, it's huge. I mean, it's just the landscape has opened up. It's very curious. The whole process has shifted so much because with medical marijuana, you're talking about a whole different potency to the marijuana. So the dispensaries now breed marijuana with a certain kind of potency that you really need to do the data where you're controlling the potency and have real good access to the information about any kind of double-blind data concerning seizure disorders. Each seizure disorder can be a little different in the way that's managed. But anecdotally, a lot of people are using CBD that's bought into the dispensaries, various kinds of potencies, and getting results. But it's all anecdotal.
What's your expectation? Like, what do you anticipate, for example, I don't know, 5, 10 years down the road? I know we don't know for sure, but knowing what you know about the current research and findings, et cetera, what do you think the landscape will look like then when we're at the other end of some more valid controlled studies?
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to predict, but it's almost certain. I mean, by the time something achieves the level of data, anecdotal data that dictated this research that's currently being done, I mean, people are putting their research, careers on the line and putting a lot of money into the data and clinical groups, and they're certainly going to get some really, I think, rich response rates. How well it'll apply to all the seizure disorders, that's very much in question. You can only know that by doing the research. But there's been a tremendous need for control of seizure disorders, particularly in the congenital population.
I know probably like a lot of people, I've seen some amazing, somewhat hard to believe perhaps, stories about children with all kinds of severe challenges, families moving to Colorado specifically to have access to medical marijuana. And I'm not going to ask you about specific cases, but do you think that some of that is sort of placebo effect, if you will? Or, because, I mean, to me, it's incredible that families are moving. I mean, they're uprooting and moving to another state simply to have access to this medication for their kids seems very dramatic to me.
Yeah.
Is your sense that there's a rush to judgment there, given that we don't know everything we need to? Or is it your sense that there may be something to it because of some of the anecdotal results that people are claiming?
It's just hard to make a statement about it. Pain is probably the largest indication that people get their cards. And pain is very difficult to research. There's a huge, the psychological element when you study pain is enormous. And then the placebo effect in trying to factor it out is enormous when you're looking at a psychoactive substance. And what exactly is happening with pain control needs to be really documented quite closely, but there's a lot of anecdotal reports of pain control with both THC and CBD. It's hard to say exactly what's going on until the research is done. But if there were a medical part of that population moving into the state, the largest part of that population would probably not be seizure patients. There would be a few moms with their kids that don't have very good seizure control, but the largest part of that migration would be pain-related more than likely.
And
there's some MS patients, and of course there are smaller groups and various kinds, but go ahead.
I was hoping you could help me with this distinction, because when I took a look preparing for our show today, I noticed that there was a distinction drawn between nerve pain and general pain.
Yeah.
And you talked about the nerve sites before when you were explaining some of the biochemistry involved with the receptors. And my sense is, and I know it's way too early to draw conclusions in terms of the early research, but it sounds like there's a little bit more optimism that medical marijuana may benefit nerve pain versus general pain. And as you mentioned, ironically, according to the Colorado Department of Health and Environment, more than 90% of medical marijuana card holders use it for pain control, but the research is pretty poor when you talk about general pain control as compared to nerve pain specifically.
Right. And why the neurogenic pain seems to be much more predictable in response is just, again, you're talking about pain. This comes in so many different forms from every kind of system that is in the body. And it's very difficult to make a statement about it. But certainly it's got a lot of attention.
Yeah, I agree. Those of you that are in our audience, we'd be open to questions. If you have questions, raise your hand and I'll know, and then I'll repeat your question. We're not going to show you on TV just because that doesn't seem right, but I'm happy to, especially because I can ask your question to Dr. Johnston. I don't have to answer it myself. I'm more than happy to do that. Yes.
I'm a California patient. I'm here visiting. I write for Dope Magazine. I'm doing a feature. I had to get my card in California because of lower back pain, but that's not why I needed the card. I put my thyroid disease with menopause into remission by ingesting wheat. And I had to say that I needed the card for lower back pain. So I don't think it's correct that you say most people use this for pain. A lot of people have to say lower back pain in order to get the card for a myriad of ailments that this is helped by.
We have someone in our audience that just mentioned that she's from California. Correct me if I'm wrong about any of this. And that she got her card, even though technically it said for back pain, but it really wasn't for back pain. It was really to address
Hormonal issues with thyroid disease and menopause.
hormonal issues with thyroid disease and menopause.
I was on 10 prescription meds and got off of all of them by juicing the wheat, no psychoactive.
And she mentions that she was on 10 different prescribed medications before switching to medical marijuana. And subjectively, obviously, you've been happy with the results.
It's my only medicine now. I ingest many different ways, psychoactively and non-psychoactively. It's my only medicine. Since then, I put my breast cancer into remission. I have a partially disabled knee that I use topically and I ingest. Pain is not an issue with me because of my ingesting. And it insults me to hear the word placebo at all, frankly.
And along those lines, are you frustrated about sort of the lukewarm welcome that medical marijuana has had in the medical community?
Well, it's ironic you bring that up today because I'm being hosted in Denver. I'm from Humboldt County, California. I cover 4 states for Dope Magazine: California, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington. I'm here doing my Denver feature with my girlfriend from high school who's hosting me. She has MS, and it has been hell to try and get her real medicine. She can't eat candy. That's more recreation. She needs real meds. And we've been, I mean, she's literally in tears because we haven't been able to find the CBD oil. And when we do, it's so outrageously expensive. And then there's so many made with hemp, which is incorrect. So that's not the real deal. So it's been very frustrating for my friend. She's literally been in tears for a few days now. And it may turn out that she has to put up a little greenhouse in her backyard and do some other plants and juice wheat to put her MS into remission. Because what I see in the 4 states I've covered, every dispensary lobby I've stood in, I see patients lining up to smoke for symptoms and they're on prescription meds when they could ingest and put their ailment into remission. So that's what I write about, is education on medicine so that people will know there's alternatives to just smoking.
And I'm going to just say this, but then I'm hoping Dr. Johnston can clarify because I'm not a medical doctor. But my sense is that the medical community has been reluctant to jump on board, I think primarily because of the lack of scientific study to validate the results, et cetera. Is that a fair statement to make, Dr. Johnston?
Well, I mean, the claims that are being made are very striking. So you're not alone.
Right. This is all I write about for the last 4 years. And the thing is, you can write all your ordinances you want. You can make it as difficult as possible for patients to get medicine. The plant and people prevail. I mean, we can make our medicine in our kitchen and do it ourselves. We know what works. These ordinances are hurting us. I mean, I just went to the dandelion dispensary with my friend. I wasn't allowed to go in and help her, and I'm an expert in this field. And she came out of the room crying with exorbitantly priced products. So it's a struggle for patients who want to do this medicine, but these ordinances and rules are just, it's hard.
In case you can't hear at home, I just want I just want to, in case our viewers can't hear at home, I just want to mention that the discussion we're having is with someone in the audience who has expertise in this area, has written in this area for many years, is with a friend who suffers from MS and has been really frustrated at not being able to get the correct medicine to really help her condition because of all of the red tape involved and the fact that some of the medicine that they've been able to find at dispensaries really is not of the right quality and strength to get the job done.
And there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of bud tenders who are not educated. I mean, she was offered smoking oil to ingest for her MS today. And that to me is not acceptable. She's always offered candy, that's not acceptable.
Gotcha. And I just want to mention, and I know that the studies need to be done, and we do need a lot more research. But in taking a look online, I did come across something about a British study that was done. And this is small numbers, and obviously it has to be replicated. But this was looking at multiple sclerosis in particular. And there were 66 MS patients, and 42% experienced relief compared to the 16% in the placebo group, which is certainly dramatic results, needs to be replicated, et cetera. But I think it lends itself to the idea that maybe we have to stop underestimating the potential benefit of medical marijuana and really, do it in a very responsible way, but do it in a way that's going to benefit the community if this is something that would benefit folks that are suffering. And I think it is possible to make the argument, especially when you look at pain medication, for example. I mean, think about what's happening nationally right now, where so many people are addicted to oxycodone and other morphine derivative painkillers that they're now shifting to heroin. Heroin is spiked in our country. And so I think the hope is that we can find more natural kinds of treatments like medical marijuana, potentially, where folks can utilize these substances and maybe have far less side effects than some of the things that are currently sort of acceptable and prescribed quite regularly currently. Any additional thoughts?
No, that's well said.
And so I think part of it's going to be time, really. It's going to take time. It's going to take advocacy, I would assume. And, again, the thing that I find interesting, and I'm really curious from Dr. Johnston about this, and maybe it's been changing, but I think initially, and this is just my opinion, I think initially when medical marijuana was discussed in Colorado and eventually legalized, there was really different points of view about what the sort of agenda was around that. And I think a lot of people thought it was simply just a way to legalize marijuana. And I'm guessing some folks involved in that movement, maybe that was their agenda, I don't know. But I think part of the challenge is sort of the perception of legitimacy around medical marijuana. And I think that's sort of a cultural shift that we're going through right now. But my sense is that we're not there yet, because I think for and again, Dr. Johnston would know much better than me, but I think for a lot of medical professionals, there is such reluctance, to prescribe medical marijuana. I mean, it's not a common thing yet by far, even here in Colorado, for example. And so I think this is a process, and it's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds as time goes on, and as research perhaps supports its efficacy. We could see there's a lot of cultural issues that we dramatically shift in over time. Same-sex marriage would be another example where 50 years ago, wow, no one would imagine things are where they are now. And I think that we're going to see an evolution in terms of medical marijuana too, based on good science. I think that's the rub right now, that that the medical community is reluctant to leapfrog over good science and go right to treatment, because that's not the medical model. The medical model is you carefully research medications, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, just to add another thought about this, so everyone will focus on efficacy when it gets down to researching a substance. And however you don't like the term placebo, I'm not saying that it's simply placebo. It's that a lot of people will report a response and they're not getting the active agent, and that means marijuana too. So they don't get the active agent that you're researching, and they're reporting a response. And that's the only way you can really determine efficacy. But the research that's focused on efficacy is one thing. Research so much in the medical field has all to do with side effects, toxicity, dosing, indications for that vary a great deal, and not just strictly one kind of syndrome, because there's many kinds of MS patients, multiple sclerotic syndrome itself cannot be reduced to just one kind of MS. And which kinds respond in which ways really requires a careful understanding of each of the cannabinoids and what's working.
One of the things that I hear a lot, question.
I'm just wondering in these last few minutes if there are facts or myths that you care to address with us.
Facts or myths?
In terms of the
I'm trying
topic?
to address some of the facts, but say more of what you're asking. Is there a particular myth or?
A few minutes left and the talk is facts and myths. I'm hoping you have some facts and myths we could discuss or share.
The person in the audience is asking about specific information about facts or myths. As we've talked about, there's some emerging data, facts, that we're seeing some benefit with certain treatment areas, like epilepsy, for example. And I think part of the myths is really an overreach to conclude that it's helpful for a wide variety of things that we haven't yet proven, like what we've talked about today, that there are a lot of things like pain relief. The research is not too strong yet about pain relief. That's not nerve pain, like we talked about before. And so I think that's a very common thought. When medical marijuana was first being proposed, one of the areas that it seemed extremely beneficial, and it is treating glaucoma patients. More recent research shows that the effect of reducing the swelling that helps the glaucoma patient is very temporary. And so the amount of medical marijuana that they have to use would be almost constant. Now, maybe that will change with research and knowledge. So there's been a lot of myths that through research are being debunked. And also, research is helping us to develop what those facts are. So that's really what we're talking about.
You're not talking about ingesting, correct?
Well, this is one of the problems is the, in terms of the science, it has to be really carefully controlled in terms of dosage level, et cetera. And ingesting marijuana through smoking is a much tougher thing to quantify as compared to a dosage of something, especially when you're doing large research over thousands of people. We are just about out of time. I want to thank our audience for being here today. And I also want to, again, thank our sponsors, the Boulder Valley School District, Channel 22, Daily Camera, Centennial Peaks Hospital, Boulder Counseling Cooperative, Parent Engagement Network, Hope Coalition. And we're going to stick around if the audience has more questions, certainly. But I really appreciate you taking the time to watch, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you so much.
And now the planet's done its bowing down, and soon the growth returns to follow ground. But I know what's churning underneath the snow, and I love my baby, and we've miles to go. Hey, 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 I'm okay. Be with me. We'll beat this, can't you see? So wait a while, winter time.